Thank you, Brian. 1 Samuel chapter 29. We're going to get out of 1 Samuel and then head straight line to 2 Samuel, which is 20-something chapters. So we'll be in Samuel a while longer. But we are advancing. When you read the story of David and Saul, you see how complicated life gets when you struggle spiritually. If what I read is true, that in this period that we've been discussing where David is kind of low and he never writes a psalm. None of the psalms are written when he's in this kind of, it's almost like remember he's in Philistine country. He's spent 16 months in Philistine country to try and get away from Saul. And Saul is not on the right path and David is struggling and there's just this huge amount of conflict and trouble from all that's going on. And it reminds us again like how difficult and complicated life gets when one or two or however many just stray a little bit. You just have to stray a little bit and life gets wild, right? You've got these two men. Saul started off like wildfire, like great, didn't last very long. David is a brilliant man, a champion, and he slays Goliath obviously, and then he's going to be king. But he's really, really struggling. And we make these decisions and we'll see what happens tonight. This is really amazing. So last week we finished with Saul. Saul's best idea was calling up Samuel from the dead. Not a great idea. Chapter 29, verse 1. David, remember, is pretending to be for the Philistines. He's actually been going out and killing the Israelite enemies, the Amalekites and such. King Achish thinks he's been killing people in Israel. King Achish thinks David is going to be his bodyguard for life. King Achish thinks that Israel is done with David, and so he's got this giant that's on his side, this giant slayer on his side. And David has taken cover in Philistine country, and God never told him to do that. And so now, you know when you do your own thing, it can go okay for a minute. But when you do your own thing, at some point it's going to be shown to be your thing. Like whether it's today, tomorrow, a month from now, when you go off kilter a little bit, you reap what you sow, right? David finds himself, and God is so amazing. God is like brilliant. I know you know that. But he's very gracious. He disciplines us. He's loving. He's everything. Like God is everything. If you ask in these stories, is God good? Yes. Is he gracious? Yes. Does he discipline? Yes. Do you reap what you sow? Yes. I mean, it's everything. God is everything. And you read this, it says the entire Philistine army. And what's funny about that includes David and his 600 men. Who in the world thought that David would be part of a Philistine army? I mean, it's nuts. He acted crazy the first time he met Achish and drilled down his beard. Not to mention that Goliath from Gath is the guy that David killed. It's all kinds of, I mean, you ever wondered how people end up together? The most unlikely of couples. I mean, David in Philistine country is wild, right? The entire Philistine army mobilized at Aphek, and the Israelites camped at the spring in Jezreel. They're about to go to war. The Philistines and the Israelites, and David, the future king of Israel, is on the Philistine side. You can't write this. You can't make this up. But he's made these choices. He jumped into something doing his own thing. God never told him to hide in Philistine country. But God is going to be gracious and God's going to help him. The Philistine rulers, verse 2, were leading out their troops in groups of hundreds and thousands. There's a bunch of them. Hundreds and thousands. And this is wild. When at the front is where you really get most of the action, right? When you're marching out, the people at the front are the ones in grave danger. In fact, the 2.5 tribes who wanted land on the other side of the Jordan were told, you're going to lead us in. If you want that land, you can have that land, but part of your responsibility is not only are you going to cross the Jordan with us, but you're going to be on the front end. So if there's casualties, guess what? But you find David at the rear. You find David with the king. Imagine that. That's how much the king has bought into David. He's asked him to be his bodyguard for life. How in the world? So you've got all of these men marching out, and at the back, Of course, you stay at the back with the king, so he's the last one to get it, right? But David and his men, it says, David and his men, 600 of them, march at the rear with King Achish. David is in a mess in so many ways. He's now finding himself protecting the king, and he's protecting the king from Israel. What do you do? Kill the king? Kill Israelites? He's got himself, and by the way, how in the world do you sell that to 600 fighting people? How do you sell that to your wives and children? How do you tell what's true about God and tell them why? How many people in the Israelite family, the 600 that are with David, plus their wives and children, how many are wondering, why in the world are we in Philistine country? Like on the one hand, David is this giant slayer, he's this champion, and yet he's portraying a life that is really hard to... How do you tell your kids, I'm scared, I did my own thing, and I'm just here? He's got himself in this crazy predicament. And it says he's guarding the king. But the Philistine commanders, verse 3, demanded, what are these Hebrews doing here? God is really, really good to David. David needs an exit plan and he doesn't have one. You ever been there? We rush headlong into something and then we realize... we don't pray about it, we do it, and then we're in it, and then we ask God to help us, right? We need an exit plan, and we need it like yesterday. And if God doesn't help David, who knows where this goes? But David has been promised. He's going to be king. We've talked about that. David can't die. God has mandated that he will be the next king. And so he finds himself in chapter 29. And in verse 3, the Philistines said, what are these Hebrews doing here? They get scared. They start to figure it out that this plan might not be great because in the heat of battle, they know who David is. They know what he's done to, by the way, they know what he's done to Goliath, their hero. What happens in the heat of battle if David, who is supporting the king, kills the king? He can do it. But do you understand that God is over all of this? Like, the Philistines are thinking a certain way because God needs David to get out of there. David can't get out of there on his own. Nothing David can do on his own, but God is manufacturing, orchestrating this whole situation. And God is going to be very gracious to David, but lest you think he gets away with this, we're going to find out that he has a rough road to walk down, because that's what happens. Whilst God is gracious and gets David out of a mess, there's still a penalty to be paid. And you'll see how God in this section is teaching David that the only thing you have is me. You can't trust anyone else. You can't rely. As king, he needs to learn that, right? That all you need and all you have is me. And when you get in a mess, I can help you out. But he has to learn to depend on God and God alone. Not on your own plans, not on military strength, not on another king, not on alliances, not on your money. David, you have to trust in me. You have to lean on me. You have to listen to me. And David's in this spiral of 1 minute he's really spiritual, and the next he's really struggling. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's our walk, right? 1 minute we're getting it, and the next it's like, man, 2 steps forward and 4 steps backwards. God is working out things for his glory and David's good. And it's amazing that God is so gracious. I mean, God could have said, you got yourself in it. Get yourself out. But God is protecting David even when he has got himself in this mess. It's kind of hard. It's kind of one of those things. What do you do with kids? See, when your kid gets in a mess, sometimes you want to help them out and you help them out, right? But other times you let them figure it out. And this time God's going to take him out. But I would be very careful of assuming that jumping into every mess, God is just going to work it out and grab you. Sometimes he might leave you to figure it out. Anyway, it says the Philistine commanders, what are these Hebrews doing here? They're not buying it, and they're not buying it because God won't allow them to buy it, and they get a bit scared, and it makes sense. And it's really weird. the Philistines seem to understand more than anybody else what's going on. And Achish told him, this is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel. Well, that used to be true. He used to play his musical instruments and calm Saul down. Saul was very appreciative of David when he took down Goliath. They used to be close. They used to be servant. But he's been on the run for like 10 years. That relationship is done. He's been with me for years. That's a bit of an exaggeration. He's been there 16 months. And this is wild, and I've never found a single fault in him from the day he arrived until today. But you don't know what he's been. See, the king doesn't know what David's been doing. David has been doing these secret missions. The king doesn't know about it. And yet he thinks David is this like perfect person. David isn't a perfect person. But God has, but the king of the Philistines, King Achish, he thinks that David has got his back no matter what. Verse 4, the Philistine commanders were angry. Send him back to the town you've given him. Remember, he didn't want to stay in Gath. He wanted a separate town for him and the Israelites. And so Achish had given him Ziklag. They had traveled now to Aphek where the war was going on, but his home is actually 3 days away in Ziklag. And so they've mobilized the troops at Aphek, but 3 days away is really their home. And the Israelites have made a home in Philistine country in this place called Ziklag. And he says, send him back to Ziklag, the town you've given him. He can't go into the battle with us. What if he turns against us in battle and becomes our adversary? And by the way, they've got hundreds and thousands of troops, it says, right? And yet they're still scared of who? They're still scared of David. And I don't think they're scared of David. I think they're scared of the God of David. And they don't want to go into battle with him. It's exactly what the church did to the Apostle Paul. When Paul got saved, and they were like, we don't want him around us because this could all be a ruse. And what better way to kill the church and act like you saved, get in the church and wreck it all. Turns out he was truly saved, but they were scared about it for a minute. What if he turns against us in battle and becomes our adversary? Is there any better way for him to reconcile himself with his master than by handing our heads over to him? They think he might be trying to get right with Saul. Like if I kill all these Philistines, then me and Saul will be good. Well, that's not what he's doing. And by the way, by now we should know that there's no deals with Saul. Like no matter what David does, Saul's going to kill him. There's nothing he can do. There's nothing. Every time David has saved his life twice. He could have killed Saul twice. And Saul says, oh, you're my son, and oh, you're a better person than me, and may God bless you. But Saul has no intention of changing. But they start to think you're here to kill us and then grant favor with Saul. And that's what everyone's been trying to do. And no, everybody in this story is trying to have favor with the wrong people. Saul is trying to have favor with who knows who, the people, I guess. The people are trying to have favor with Saul. David's trying to have favor with the Philistines. No one's actually looking for favor with God. Like David's off in left field. Saul's off in left field. The Philistines don't care about God. No one is looking and saying, I need the favor of God for the most part. I mean, everybody is on Saul's side because he's king. And they want to do for Saul so they will be rewarded. That's it. They don't care for Saul particularly. They don't have to like him. But remember, constantly David has been told, they're telling Saul where David is. Why? Why would you give up David? Because you think Saul's going to pay you out. And let me tell you, when your hope is in Saul, good luck. When your hope is in the Philistines or anyone else. And so, in verse 5, isn't this the same? This song keeps coming back. Isn't this the same David about whom the women of Israel sing in their dances? Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. It's kind of funny. It was like a nice little song that was written for him, right? But it keeps biting him. It keeps coming over and over and over again. And David has this legacy of being able to kill 10,000s, and the Philistines are scared. Verse 6, Achish is feeling the heat from his commanders. King Achish wants to keep David, but nobody else does. Achish finally summoned David and said to him, I swear by the Lord that you have been a trustworthy ally. I'm not sure swearing by the Lord for the king of the Philistines is worth anything, but I think you should go with me into battle, for I've never found a single flaw in you from the day you arrived until today. That in part has to be God's protection, right? Because if the Philistine king thought David was doing what actually he was doing, going and killing enemies of Israel, there would have been a problem. So King Achish thinks David is this perfect person, and he really thinks he's got him, because he thinks the Israelites hate him. He knows Saul. He can't go back to Saul. King Achish thinks David's his. He thinks David's his for life. He doesn't understand that he's God's. He says, I want you to stay. I want you to fight. I haven't found a single flaw in you. But the other Philistine rulers won't hear of it. Don't get upset, but go back quietly. You see how amazing this is? This is like you played Monopoly, right? This is your get out of jail free card. God, imagine David. Imagine the sleepless night, the night before the battle. What am I going to do? I got myself in this mess. I've been playing around. I don't know what. I've got to now walk in front of God's people with the king of the Philistines. And if war starts to go off, he's literally in no man's land. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know how he thought he was going to get out of this. Sometimes we just plod along and think, well. And God, in this moment, protects David. Now, David's got to learn, I'm not just going to just pulling people out of fires isn't the way to teach them all the time, right? But God's going to pull him out of this fire and teach him and make sure that David understands that doing your own thing, that's not going to work. God has a tendency to let you go till the last second, right? It's almost like the battle's about to start, and right when the battle's about to start, who steps in? God does. And he plucks his person right out. Look at what it says. Don't get upset, go back quietly. Man, God, you've got me out again. You've just saved me. David does no longer have to be part of the war. David doesn't have to make a choice between Israel and the Philistines. David has just got a free pass from God. I've helped you out. Now learn from this. Understand who I am. Take my provision. Take my protection. And then and I can't figure this out. In verse 8, instead of saying, oh, okay then, he says, what have I done to deserve this treatment, David demanded. What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight the enemies of my Lord the king? Hold on. That is a bizarre statement. God has just given him a free pass. God has opened up the door and said, hello, I'm going to help you. I'm going to protect you. And David acts all offended. And not only that, he calls King Achish my Lord the king. I'm surprised he could even get those words out of his mouth. So either David is offended. Some people think David was offended like, oh, you don't want me, I'm a warrior kind of thing. I kind of think, how do I explain this? You ever been out with someone to eat and one of you is cheap? And you know who's going to pay the bill? And they say, and you say, oh, I'll get this, knowing fine well that if they say, oh, thank you, you've just got yourself in a mess. Don't act like you don't know what I'm saying. You feign like you're not cheap. You feign like you're going to do something nice. And you say, I'll get this. And if they say yes, yeah, you're done. But what happens is no, we'll get that. Oh, okay then. Are you sure? You only push so hard because if they actually make you pay, then it's almost like David's doing that. He's still carrying out this he's like, oh, well, why? It's almost like he's doing that, right? It's almost like he's still playing along. He's still playing this role. He's still acting. God has told him, get out. And he's like, well, what did I do to offend you, my Lord? And he puts on this front almost like I'm offended. It's like, dude, just get out. I don't fully understand what he's doing or what he's saying, but either some people, like I said, think he was like offended that they didn't need him or want him as a fighter. Like, I can fight. But he doesn't want to fight. Like, I just know there's times where you say stuff and you're putting on a kind of an act, and it's like he's still playing it, he's still got this facade, and he's like, what have I done? Why can't I fight with you? And if the king says you're fighting, then what does he do? You see, David's playing this dangerous game, because if King Achish says, you're right, go fight, then what? Okay, have the bill. Achish insisted in verse 9. You know why the king's not going to be swayed? Because God won't let him get swayed. God is protecting his man. As far as I'm concerned, you're as perfect as an angel of God. Man, this guy is really, man. Yeah, David has got him hook, line, and sinker. But the Philistine commanders are afraid to have you with them in battle. So the king is like, look, I like you and I want you and I need you as my bodyguard, I think. But all of these other people, he will not put David in at the expense of everyone else coming against him. All of his people are saying, we don't want him. And so the king's like, look, I would take you. Nobody wants you. Just go home. Man, God has been good to David. The Philistine commanders are afraid. Verse 10, get up early in the morning and leave with your men as soon as it gets light. Man, what should David have been doing all night? I mean, he should have just been thankful, right? I mean, you go from the night before to this night. The night before, you thought you were going to get in a mess. You thought you were going to have to be with the king and fight the Israelites. I mean, how do you ever become king when previously you've been fighting the Israelites? Imagine if he starts killing Israelites in battle. It's hardly a great way to gain the kingship, is it? God's not going to allow that to happen. God has basically looked at this situation, and he's been very gracious and very kind and very merciful to David, and he's got his man out without David having to fight. But what I'm telling you is that's great and that's fantastic. But before you think that's fine, I can get myself in a mess, God will just get me out, and that's how that plays out, David's going to pay a steep price for all of this. And we'll see it in a minute. But God has been good. Imagine the next morning. You think the 600 men were like, oh, can we stay? The 600 men were delighted to get back home to their kids, or they thought they were going home to their wives and children. He says, get up. And so David, verse 11, and his men headed back into the land of the Philistines. He's not going back to Israel. He's going back to Ziklag, where he lives in the middle, in the south of the Philistine country. And Ziklag is a town that was promised to Judah, but Judah didn't have it. If you go back to Joshua, Ziklag was one of the towns they should have conquered, but they didn't. And so he has this Ziklag, and they head back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistine army went on to Jezreel. And so David leaves, he takes his men home. God is trying to show David, you have to trust me. He's showing him that you reap what you sow, that whilst I got you out of that mess, I'm going to challenge you now. Look at what happens. 3 days later, it takes them 3 days to get from Aphek to Ziklag. 3 days later, David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag. They just assumed what? They assumed that everything would be all right. God has been good to me. God got me out, and I'll just go home and we'll move on from here. 3 days later, David and his men arrived home. 1 Samuel 30 verse 1. At their town of Ziklag. And who do they find? Who do they find have made a raid? Why are they even here? The Amalekites, remember what happened with the Amalekites? When Israel left Egypt and they were on the way to the promised land, they ran into the Amalekites, and the Amalekites wouldn't help God's people. They would not help God's people. They wouldn't give them provision. They wouldn't give them protection. They didn't want to help God's people. And the Bible tells us that then God remembers this. From that time on, God had put it in his mind and heart that he was going to avenge that. That the Amalekites would no longer have any reason to have anything but God's judgment come upon them. And remember who's told to get rid of the Amalekites? Saul is. And remember, he keeps King Agag. He keeps some of the sheep and all that stuff. Obviously, some other people survive. And all of a sudden, this race of people that should have been dead is still what? Do you see? Do you see that Saul's sin is now costing David? That what Saul didn't do is now actually messing up David? You understand, right, that if you don't obey God, it's not just you that it affects. Like Saul had this chance to do what God asked him to do. And remember what happens when he refuses to kill Agag and keep the plunder and lie about it? God says, the kingdom's gone. You're done. You're not going to be king anymore. That should make us pause for a moment, right? And this was a while later, right? It's not tomorrow. It's not the next day. But Saul's lack of integrity, Saul's lack of obedience didn't just kill him. And by the way, it's going to kill his son. Saul's life is this tragic tale of this is what happens when you don't do what God's told you to do. I mean, if you look at Saul's life and he's like, well, I did it my way. Okay, what did you gain from that? What did Saul gain from not doing what God would have him do? Nothing. Yeah, he gained all the wrong stuff. And the Amalekites that shouldn't even be around, they shouldn't even be there, are still there. Remember, look, 1 Samuel 15:7, it says, Saul slaughtered the Amalekites, which is what he was told to do. He was told to kill the entire Amalekite nation in chapter 15. Men, women, children, babies, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys. That's the kind of side of God that we get scared of. But he done told them, because you did that to my people, I'm going to avenge that. So God does. He says, go and kill them all. And it says, they went and they slaughtered the Amalekites, but he captured the king. He completely destroyed everyone else. Saul and his men spared Agag. They kept the best of the sheep, the goats, the cattle, the fat calves, and the lambs. Everything, in fact, that appealed to them. So Saul is meant to leave all the stuff, to kill all the stuff, to kill all the animals, to kill everybody. And he's like, I don't want to do that. This sheep, this goat, this cattle, I like that. And because of him, the Amalekites are still around. And notice what happens. David has been away. Why has David left his family? Why has David left his wives? Because he's got caught up in this silly battle. He had to leave. Because if he doesn't leave to go fight with King Achish, guess what? He's in trouble. The king has called this battle, and he has to leave his home. And so all the fighting men, the 600 men and David, all go out, and they leave who? You leave all the women and children behind. And look what happens. They found that the Amalekites, this group of people that Saul should have taken care of, had made a raid into the Negev and what? Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burned it to the ground. David sees, you see, how would David describe God to you right now? This is what I'm telling you. God is there. Is God good to you? Yeah. Is God gracious? Yeah. Does God love you? Yeah. Did God help you? Apparently so. He just got me here. I mean, I was in a world of hurt and God helped me. But there's another side of God that's like, whilst you're doing this, you're showing me that you still need to be trained and molded. So just before you think you got a free pass, we're going deeper. Like David, you need more help. You're going to be my king. You're going to be my ambassador. And that's what we are, ambassadors, right? And what God does in our lives is he says, man, I'll help you out here. But after, you ever said that to your kids? We'll leave it tonight, but tomorrow we're going to have a talk. It's almost like God said that to his kid. David, I got you out because I have my own purposes and plans for you, and I'm not going to let you die. I want you as my king. And why God allows David to do all this stuff and keeps him as king and doesn't Saul, you'll have to ask him. But God is trying, just every time you read this, just imagine, God is trying to make David understand that when you're king, it's imperative you do things my way. It's imperative that you rely on me and me alone. It's imperative as king that you don't go in these like wild hares and do this stuff because you're going to get you. And by the way, he's got, as is now, he got him and 600 people in trouble. But when you're king and you do your own thing, you know how many people you get in trouble? The whole nation. David has put 600 men in jeopardy by getting them in a fight they thought they would have to fight. If you're king, that's a lot more. You can't do these things, David. You've got to get better. You've got to get trained. And you know that God knows exactly how to get your attention, right? You know exactly how God stretches us. Look what happens. So they get to Ziklag. Woo! God's gracious. You can almost imagine. Oh, that was close. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Woo! We're home. And the whole thing's burned. They had carried off the women and children and everyone else. Now the Bible says without killing anyone, which is what happens, but they don't know that. They get to Ziklag and the whole town is burned down and nobody is there. What do you think God's saying to David? Where are you going this time, David? What are you going to do? Who are you going to turn to? And there's this crucible of fire right now, literally. He's in this crucible, he's in this testing, and he's in these trials, and God is molding his man, and God is protecting everybody. Now, we don't know, it never says, but you get the idea when they're partying and stuff. I don't know if anything happened to the wives or the women, it doesn't say. But all we know is they didn't get killed. It doesn't mean they didn't get messed with. I don't know what happened. But I could make the case when they're all reviling and partying that some of their women were probably not safe. Maybe God protected them. I don't know. But can you imagine your women, your wives and your children being with the Philistines or with the Amalekites? The Amalekites are worse than the Philistines. I think that's hard to do. They carried off the women and children, and David is left there. What do you do if you're David? Look at what happens in verse 3. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep what? I don't know if you've ever been there, but that's pretty high grief. They wept and they wept and they wept. And they searched for anybody in town, and they didn't find anybody. You imagine the scene. David has been graciously brought out of a fire, but God is going to train him. You know whose fault this is, right? I mean, if you're part of the 600 men, who are you going to look to? And what are you going to say to David? Dude, why did we leave home in the first place? Like, what part of fighting against Israel did you think was a good idea? Sometimes as a leader, you get really hammered for some crazy decisions, right? And David has led them into this craziness. And now God gets his attention because all the women and all the children are gone. And they weep and they weep and they weep until they can't weep anymore. In verse 5, David's 2 wives, that's crazy in itself. But David's 2 wives, Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. Man, God, you got me out, but now I've lost my wives. God, I've seen your protection. I've seen your grace. I've seen your mercy. I've seen your love. I've seen everything you did for me. But now, God, I've got another problem. How in the world do I get these back? They all think they're dead. That's a pretty good assumption, right? Or at the least, what's happened? They're kidnapped. And all of a sudden, their wives are gone. And look what happens in verse 6. Don't tell me that God isn't trying to tell David, it's me and you, and that's it. Forget all of this nonsense about depending on King Achish. Forget all this nonsense about worrying about Saul. Forget doing your own plans, your own thing. David, if you're going to be my king, it's me and you, and that's it. I'm your power, I'm your hope, I'm your source. David, as long as you've got me, you've got everything you could need. And if you'll walk with me, and you'll abide with me, and you'll do as I say, me and you are going to have some amazing times together. And God has put him in this situation. Literally, hold on. His wives are gone, and look at what it says. David was in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters. And they began to talk of what? You know that Saul can't kill him and the 600 men can't kill him. But 600 men are so hacked off, they're so mad, they're so dispirited that they want to stone David. This is a really bad business meeting. Right? Things have gone really, really bad. But literally, and by the way, he hasn't talked to Jonathan and he won't see Jonathan again. At this moment in time, name me one person. Samuel's dead. Jonathan's out of the picture. Name his wives are gone. Name me one person who David has. One. The 600 men want to stone him. David literally doesn't have an ally left on earth. King Achish likes him, but he can't help him. He's got his own battle, and nobody wants David to fight with them. Literally, David is brought down to what? It's you and me. We think that's horrible, but it's actually one of the best things God ever did for David. We would think, God, what are you doing? How can you do that to my kids? How can you do that to my wives? All these people saying all this stuff. And yet you'll see it works. You'll see it works. That when you hit to rock bottom, sometimes God is like, say, have you ever noticed that you sometimes it takes losing somebody or something to get your attention? I mean, okay, so if David's like, if David ever got perturbed in his spirit enough to say, you know what, God, if you're going to, I can't follow you right now. He literally doesn't have another option. I mean, where's he going? His own men want to kill him. It's literally David. David has fought Goliath, right? But now it's David versus, he hasn't got anybody. He can try and run away back to Jonathan, I guess. He's got nobody. And so what does David do? Exactly what God had designed him to do. But David found strength in who? In the Lord his God. David has been far away. He hasn't written a psalm. He's been far away from God. He's been on the run. He's been getting disciplined. He's not been where he needs to be. And in this sweet, sweet moment, God sees his king, his future king, finding his strength in what? In the Lord his God. That's exactly what David needed to learn. You find your strength in me. And if you find your strength in me, you wouldn't be scared of Saul and wouldn't be running off to Philistine country. And that's what God is teaching you through your trials and tribulations. And that's why, let me tell you again, when you listen, this is really, really important. When you find your strength in anything or anyone else, it becomes a target. Not only for the devil, but for God. When you try to find your strength in yourself, in your husband, wife, money, career, you name it. If you try to find your strength in any other source but God, the devil loves it. The devil will push that all day long. Man, imagine if we tonight say, we need to find our strength in each other. The devil will like that. The devil couldn't care what you took your strength in. Just not the name of the Lord. You realize the devil's on board with every source of strength you have outside of God. And so if you want to go outside of God, the devil, woo, go ahead. And God is wanting David now to find strength in him. He's been away for 16 months. He's been living like this fugitive in enemy territory, doing his own thing. 16 months. But now God has his king. And I'm telling you, that happens in our life. You say, why, God? Why? Because for 16 months you didn't find your strength in me, and now I've got you where I need you to be. now you're looking for strength. You ever had days like that where no matter what, you had to find your strength in the Lord? Like there was nothing else. Like, haven't you been there? Like, yeah, people can say stuff, people can send flowers, people can hug you, people can make phone calls, people can make you dinner, people can hang out with you, people can do everything they can for you. And that's good and it's encouraging and there's something to that. But you know what? They can't give you strength. Like when you turn to the Lord and say, you know what? It's you and me. And you know what? If you're a Christian tonight, that strength is available to you at all times in all places. And the reason you're not finding strength in the Lord is not because he doesn't want to give you it. It's because you've gone off in left field and thought you could find strength somewhere else. It's almost like this isn't working for me, God. And right before he goes into Philistine country, he's like, I'm not scared of Saul. He's either dying in battle or God will take care of it. And then he runs right to the Philistines. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Man, rock bottom might not be so bad, right? He said, and look what happens. He hasn't been consulting with God very much because God's not been wanting him to do any of this stuff. And then he says to the priest, bring me the ephod. And so he finds his strength in God. That's the beautiful thing about following God. Even when we've walked away a little bit, even when we're struggling, you know, there's times where the Spirit just moves in you and you can feel him again. You can pray again. You can have your peace back, right? He's finding his strength. And the first thing he does is go to the priest in the ephod. They had basically, it was kind of like two dice, a white and a black. And one was yes and one was no. And he'd reach in and whatever one that was yes or no. I mean, that sounds bizarre, but that's how they did it. It was like in his like pocket thing in the breastplate. He would reach in, and it's kind of like the magic 8 ball, right? I mean that. But they grabbed one, and if it was yes, it was yes, and if it was no, it was no. He reaches out and he says to God, "What should I do?" Maybe he should have tried that before getting into. I mean, look. He said in chapter 27, David kept thinking, "Someday Saul's going to get me." That's just a lie. That's a lie of the devil. And he's like, Saul's going to get me. Saul's going to get me. So he does his own thing. And now God has him. And he seeks after the priest. And Abiathar brought it. And David asked the Lord, should I chase after this band of raiders? Look at what he's doing. Exactly what we should do. God, should I go? Am I going to catch them? And if God says yes, guess what? You go. And if God says no, you stay. Be careful what you pray, because God will answer it, and then sometimes we're like, that's not the answer I wanted. David prays, I'm ready to. All of a sudden, David's found his strength in the Lord. He's good to go again. And the Lord told him, go after them. And listen to the promise of God. This is how amazing God is. He doesn't just say, go after them. He said, will I catch? All David asks is two things. What does David ask of God? Should I go after them? And will I catch them? Right? That's all he asked. God could have said, go after them. And he would have had to what? But David is seeking after God. And God is gracious again. You realize we're kind of on a need-to-know basis, right? God doesn't often give us more information than what we need. And yet he gives David this amazing promise. Look at what he says. Go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you. Wow. This is what we've been talking about. God's just told him before he sees it. Before he sees it. You know what he's telling David? You're going to get back. You know what everything means? Not one kid. Not one bit of your plunder will be gone. Not one wife. Before he sees it, God has given him this word, this prophecy. God has been really, really good to David. And it's almost like now David can walk into battle and he shouldn't fear at all. God has told him, you will not lose anything. You will recover everything. This is what we've been talking about. You can go to the 600 men and say, we win, we win. Like, how can you possibly know that? Because God's told me. When Paul goes to Rome, the same thing happens. When Paul's trying to get to Rome, they don't listen to him. And he says to them, in the middle, he says, this ship is going down. God has spoken to me, and we're going to get shipwrecked. And you should have listened to me. You didn't. We're going to get shipwrecked. But all of our lives will be saved. That's what God, and guess what? Ship is wrecked, and not one person is lost. And God's given, you imagine what that does for you? God, you care for me. God, you love me. God, you see everything. Man, imagine God says to you before the battle's even really started, you're going to win this. I won't lose a thing. What a moment. So David and his 600 men set out, and they came to the brook Besor. You know it's funny in life. It can't be coincidence. How G'd up is David right now? How excited is David? I mean, wouldn't you be pumped? And by the way, 600 men, now what? Yeah. 600 men are following you. They'll be happy when they see their wife and kid, right? But no, and by the way, how did they all of a sudden go from wanting to stone him to following him? God can do anything he needs to do for you. And all of a sudden they come to this brook. Life is good, right? God's given me you ever got there? God's given you a promise and everything's rosy until it's not. Like God has just said, you won't lose anything. You've got 600 men, right? But we're going to take that to 400. It's like Gideon. 600 men are coming with David to fight. And God gets them to this brook. And 200 of them say, I'm so emotionally spent, I can't go on. What do you think you're thinking if you're David? Like, man, you did say we'd win everything back, God, right? 600 was cool. Do you not see that the devil would love that kind of stuff? How easy would it be to get disjointed? In fact, the 400 that go out to fight, they do get disjointed. Because mentally, emotionally, imagine if 600 of us were told to go to war. And 200 of us said, it's too much. It'd be hard to be like, thanks a lot. I've got to go fight. I've got to go do you sitting here with the supplies. Thanks a lot. But I find it amazing that God has given them this amazing promise. Trust me, he goes, and as soon as they go, they get to this brook, and it says 200 of the men were too exhausted. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually spent. They're panicked because their wives and their kids are still missing. You think David's told them? Of course David's told them we're going to win. But you see, they're so exhausted that even the promises of God are keeping them there. And God allows it. God allows them. God's not going to punish them. God is very gracious, and he lets this 200 just miss the battle. And it says, David continued the pursuit with 400 men. That's awesome. I wonder what would happen if there was only 5 of them left. Like David's trying to learn that if it's just me, if 600 of them say we're too exhausted, are you coming, David? Because I done told you we win. We win. I will tell you this. 200 men miss out. They'll get the plunder. God doesn't come after them. But I would tell you, if you're part of the 200 and you were too exhausted to go, you're going to miss out on seeing the hand of God. Sure, you'll hear about it. Sure, you'll be a recipient of the victory, but you won't see it in your own eyes. You won't see God using you in a way he could use you. Maybe that's a bit too close to home tonight. I'm too exhausted. I can't do it. I won't do it. I won't do it mentally. I won't do it spiritually. I won't do it emotionally. I'm too spent. I can't do it. And God's very gracious. And maybe he doesn't come after you for that. But I think you miss stuff. Man, if 400 people see the hand of God and kill the enemy, wouldn't you want to be a part of that? Can you imagine God does this amazing thing at church and like, well, I just didn't go because I was just too tired. And I'm not trying to be, I get it. Like, I kind of have to be here, so. I know there's nights you don't want to come. I know there's things, but man, sometimes, you ever notice that sometimes when you least want to be here, that's when God does something the greatest? Like I did everything I could to stay home. I asked my wife 10 times, we going? Yes. Just say no one time. And God now steps in again. Along the way, they happen to find an Egyptian. As you do. Because that's how David knew this was all going to start, right? Because we figured out God. God hasn't told him, you're going to run into an Egyptian. He's just told him, I'm going to win for you. David and his men are literally walking. They set out past, they've lost 200 men. That's the whole thing. They walk on. And along the way, the Bible's just kind of like, along the way. How are we going to win this? I don't know. But God said we're going to win it. Along the way, they just happened to run into an Egyptian because God's always using Egypt for your benefit. He's using an Egyptian. And he brought him to David. They gave him bread to eat and water to drink. I think I'd let him talk first and then give him my bread and water, but that's a different. They gave him bread, they gave him water, they gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, for he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for how many days? 3 days. It took David 3 days to get back. And nights. Before long, his strength returned. I don't have time to get into all of this, but do you understand that when God is moving in your life, he's doing way more outside your life? This Egyptian has been the slave of an Amalekite, and he got treated like garbage. In fact, the Amalekites just left him for dead. He got sick, and the Amalekite said, sorry about you, and left him to die. But God's people run into him, and they feed him, and they clothe him. Oh, not clothe him. They feed him, and they give him water, and they kind of nurse him back to nourishment. You think the Egyptian knew something about God in that moment? You think the Egyptian was being shown the difference between the Amalekites and the Israelites? Even an Egyptian, he must have thought, when David and his men ran into him, he must have thought, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse. And he says, David asks, to whom do you belong and where do you come from? I'm an Egyptian. The slave of what? An Amalekite. My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. I'm going to leave it there because we've got business meeting. But I want you to see that. How many lives is God working in? I mean, just in this bit, how many lives is God working in? David's, right? The 600 men, right? All the wives, all the children. The Amalekites are about to visit God. The Egyptian has had a visit with God. What I'm trying to tell you, we get very kind of personal. We get very kind of self-absorbed. And when we don't understand what God is doing in our life and we don't see the benefit of it or the timing of it, or you understand that it's not about you, right? That just maybe God is doing something a little in you to mainly do, not just for, look, everything God does is for you. But sometimes it's more about working through you than for you. In other words, you think, well, God, what have I got out of this? Well, hold on. That's not really what this is about. You see, David's life has been this train wreck kind of, and God is working in him, and he's turned. And by the way, the priest must be delighted that he's turning back to God, right? You should be. David has been struggling, and yet God is doing all of this work, he's working in the mind of King Achish. He just so happens to put an Egyptian right there. And this man has to, you understand, this man is stuck for 3 days with nothing. And yet after 3 days, he's about to visit with God. It's incredible. And God is about to show David. And he just happens to run into this Egyptian who happens to be the slave. And guess who knows where the Amalekites are? And God's going to use this Egyptian to give David exactly everything he's asked for. Maybe there's an Egyptian in the field ready for you tomorrow. Maybe what you don't know is that God's already sorted it out. And you're panicked and you're worried. Find your strength in the Lord. Trust him. Get excited now. And the best, you see, when you see the Egyptian, you don't want to be like, man, I should have doubted you, God. I've wasted all this time. I've been mad. I've been upset. I've been flustered. I should have known you were providing. You know what you need to say when you see the Egyptian? Ha ha! I knew it. I didn't know how. God, this is a new one. You got me again, but I knew you were going to come through for me. You see the difference? Like, oh, you came through for me. Well, of course I did. But man, imagine telling the 600 men, I don't know how, but God's coming. And when you see the Egyptian, you're like, God's here. What? No, this is it. This is the answer. He's a starving Egyptian. Yeah. But he's our answer. God's done it. God's done. And I can't tell you enough all those times. Don't get to a place where you look back and say, God, I just wasted 2 years frantically worrying and going mental. God, what I want to do is spend 2 years praising you for something that hasn't happened yet. And when it happens, you know what you get to say? I done told you he was coming. I've had those moments in my life where I've been able to look at people and say, God's got this. Telling people in ministry, God's got this. They're like, he don't got it. I'm like, he's got it. And then they come back, he's like, God's got it. Like, I told you. Don't waste 16 months of your life. When God just wants to, man, when you find your strength in him, whew. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts?